What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. A couple of weeks ago I released a video about an item that existed during the alpha stage of League of Legends. That item was Oracle's Hood, and it gave mages the ability to get what was essentially a critical strike on their spells. And in that video I talked about how that kind of thing could potentially create a new playstyle for the mage class, but a lot of you guys in the comments raised concerns about the concept of critical strikes. Not only on Oracle's Hood, but just in general across all of League of Legends. And with your concerns, I felt that it was a topic definitely worth discussing. It's quite the topic, and it's tough to appreciate both sides of the argument, as there are actually just as many reasons for keeping critical strikes in the game as there are for removing them. And the more I think about it and break it down, I'm not entirely sure actually. But my main question today is, should critical strikes be removed from League of Legends? And as always, if you guys enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and if you don't, hit that dislike, and let's get started. Now the reason why crit chance is a touchy subject is because it adds elements of pure statistical randomness into League of Legends. It's one thing to get lucky because you happen to randomly just throw out a skill shot and hit it by accident, and it's another thing to get lucky to maybe like face check a bush if you don't know someone's there and then you just randomly one-shot the guy at half health inside of it. I mean, in any game, whether or not we like to admit it, there's going to be moments that happen just because you got lucky or because someone else got lucky, and that's totally normal. And that type of luck is totally okay because it's something that can be completely overpowered through skill. Those moments of luck can just be completely removed from the game as long as you have enough skill to overcome them, and you know that you could have just anticipated what would have been a good spot to throw out your skill shot, or maybe if your map awareness was better you would have just known that the guy was in the bush. But with critical strikes, it's a completely different concept. Now something worth mentioning is that critical strikes in League of Legends are actually only pseudo-random. They aren't a completely random effect. What I mean by this is the amount of attacks where you do not critically strike will influence the critical strike chance of your next attack. Say for example you have a crit chance of 50%. On the first attack you'll have a pure 50% chance to crit. Now if that first hit is a crit, on the next hit you'll have a lower than 50% chance to crit. And if that first hit initially was not a critical strike, then you will have a higher than 50% chance to crit on your next attack. There's some math and some formulas about it somewhere. I'm pretty sure the formula is public, so you could probably look it up on the law wiki. But the reason why it works like that essentially is so that you don't have insane cases where you end up critically striking 6 or 7 times in a row with 50% crit chance. And that makes the super extreme results of, 6 or 7 or even like 10 crits in a row, or maybe 10 not crits in a row, just basically impossible. So it's definitely better than just having every hit have exactly a 50% chance to crit. But that's not entirely relevant to the argument. The key thing is that critical strikes are lucky or unlucky in the truest form of the word. It's 100% based on something that you as the player have absolutely no influence over. There is no element of skill or decision making that will influence when you critically strike and when you do not critically strike. And in a game that is, well, almost entirely based on skill and is highly competitive, this element of randomness can be a very weird thing that often feels like it kind of makes no sense to exist in the game. Killing someone or dying in a fight just because you got a lucky streak of 2 or 3 crits in a row or because you didn't is kind of ridiculous, and although it's certainly uncommon, we have seen some games, even at the competitive level arguably, that were decided by pure statistical luck because of critical strikes. And a long time ago there was a similar stat that existed in the game actually called dodge that would allow you to avoid getting hit based on a random chance, and that dodge stat was removed completely because the randomness factor was something Riot decided that they didn't want to exist in League of Legends, and the dodge stat is somewhat comparable to critical strikes. But that's enough about why crits are kinda lame. Let's go over some reasons about why critical strikes are actually pretty cool and can be a good thing. So the reason why crit chance exists in the first place is because it adds variance to a type of gameplay, auto-attacking, that previously does not have any variance without it. Most abilities have some element that makes them different when you actually cast them. Maybe they're a skill shot, maybe they have some counterplay or outplay potential, or maybe they just interact differently with items or based on the target's hit. And that variance is really important to create interesting gameplay and make every game a new and fresh experience. It's all of those little variances that come together at the end to make every single game of League of Legends so different from one another, and with AD carries it can be a little bit difficult to have that variance who typically have a little bit of a lackluster playstyle that just serves as a way to make their auto attack heavy gameplay strong. However, auto attacks do not have that same variance that spells and abilities do. You right click on a target and you're going to deal the exact same amount of damage to them and nothing will change from one auto attack to the next. There is no way to auto attack differently or for the mechanics to end up with a different result from your opponent's reaction. You auto attack, you do a set amount of damage. And critical strikes are the way that variance is introduced into auto attacks, and as such it makes them a decent mechanic that does bring something positive to League of Legends. And critical strikes as well, I would say, are a lot different to the dodge stat because crits are, first off, a lot less frustrating to play against. It doesn't feel nearly as bad to get hit for extra damage from someone than it does to hit someone and do literally no damage because of a random chance. Dodge was removed honestly because it was just so incredibly frustrating to play against as a result of the randomness. And critical strikes, sure, they might not always be perfect to play against, but they're definitely nowhere close to how bad dodge was. Think how many times you maybe flashed in on someone and finished them off with that last auto attack for their tiny sliver of health, and imagine if that auto attack was just dodged at a random chance and you didn't get the kill because of it. That's a lot more frustrating than just getting critically strike, and it was also a lot more relevant too because the difference is that if you attack someone and you happen to get unlucky and you just don't critically strike, you're still dealing some damage. It's just not the maximum amount. But if you get unlucky and they dodge, you do literally 0 damage, and as a result dodge was removed for reasons that don't necessarily apply to critical strikes, although I can't deny that there are some comparisons between the two stats. Let's take a more serious example. We have a game like Hearthstone, where randomness is a massive part of the entire game's design. Hearthstone has a lot of randomness in it, but also kind of for the same reason why League of Legends has critical strikes. Hearthstone is a game where every individual match is at risk of feeling completely the same. If you take two 30 card decks and play them against each other a bunch of times, it can potentially get really stale. And that's why randomness exists and is such a huge factor in Hearthstone, because it adds variance to their gameplay. And that variance is extremely important to Hearthstone, otherwise the game would just get stale quite quick. Now that kind of scenario doesn't exist in League of Legends because every game is naturally already going to play out differently, since the gameplay itself is entirely on the hands of the players to create, and with every little click making an impact, there's no way a game's ever going to play out the same way. Whereas in Hearthstone, if you just take away the randomness, or even just part of the randomness, some of it, the individual games are going to end up being quite similar to one another, and they do kind of get stale quite quick. And Hearthstone, I believe, is a great example of randomness adding a lot to the game. In fact, it's pretty brilliant design, I would say, when you look at what randomness as a whole brings to Hearthstone. And that type of variance is actually quite nice to have in a mechanic that would otherwise be much more stale. And critical strikes in League aren't this massive influencing factor. It's not like in Hearthstone where it feels like 1 out of every 4, maybe even 3 games gets decided by randomness completely sometimes. The randomness of crits in League, sure, they have an influence, but the amount of time that they actually single-handedly decide a game is so just unbelievably insignificant that it's potentially worth it to just keep the mechanic into the game to create the pattern of auto-attacking as an AD carry, and just a champion in general that's building crit chance much more interesting. So that's both sides of the argument there that I tried to present the best I could, so hopefully you guys can take a look at that information and just make your own decision. Personally, I would say that my opinion is just that I believe that no, critical strikes should not be removed from League of Legends. The champions that actually do build crit chance are the ones that entirely revolve around auto-attacking for the most part, or their entire gameplay kit was designed for the purpose of critical strikes like Yasuo. Auto-attacking as an AD carry is a massive part of their gameplay. It's not just like a minor thing. So having variance in that gameplay is important enough for crit chance to be worth keeping in the game, at least in my opinion. But I want to know what you guys think. Should critical strikes be removed from League of Legends? Leave a comment, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.